My mother's voicemail to the wrong number said, "Meet me at the usual place." The voicemail notification lit up my phone at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I almost didn't listen to it. Mom had been calling at odd hours lately, part of the early stage dementia, Dr. Patterson had explained. She'd get confused about time zones or forget she'd already called that day. But something made me hit play as I brushed my teeth. "Richard, it's me." Mom's voice was different. Clearer. More focused than I'd heard in months. "Can we meet tomorrow? Same time, same place. I know it's risky with David hovering, but I need to see you. I miss you." The toothbrush fell from my hand into the sink. "Richard. Not Ryan, my name. Richard. And David. My father's name is David." I played the message 3 more times, my hands shaking worse with each repetition. That wasn't the voice of a confused woman struggling with memory loss. That was the voice of someone planning a secret meeting. Someone who knew exactly what she was saying. My legs gave out and I sat hard on the bathroom floor. Through the thin walls of my apartment, I could hear Mrs. Chen's television playing the late-night news. Normal sounds of a normal Tuesday night, while my world quietly imploded. Dad had been taking care of Mom for 8 months now, ever since her diagnosis. I'd watched him transform from the guy who couldn't remember to replace the toilet paper into someone who researched every supplement, attended every support group meeting, and spoke to her with the patience of a saint when she'd ask him the same question 5 times in an hour. Last Sunday, he'd called me in tears because Mom hadn't recognized him for 10 minutes when she woke up from a nap. "I thought I was prepared for this," he'd whispered. But seeing that blank look in her eyes. "Christ, Ryan. I don't know if I'm strong enough." I'd driven over immediately with groceries and stayed for dinner, watching him cut her food into smaller pieces and gently remind her to take her evening pills. When she'd looked at me confused and asked who I was, Dad had squeezed her hand and said, "That's our son Ryan, honey. He loves you very much." She'd smiled then, the fog lifting momentarily. "Of course. My beautiful boy." Now I sat on my bathroom floor at midnight, realizing that maybe some of that fog wasn't real. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "Mom had a good day today. Actually helped me with the crossword puzzle. Small victories, right? Love you, kiddo." The timestamp showed 11:52 p.m. He was probably still awake, sitting in their bedroom, watching her sleep and wondering how much time they had left before the disease stole more of her away. While she planned meetings with someone named Richard. I pulled up my contacts and scrolled to Mom's number. My finger hovered over the call button. What would I even say? "Hey, got your voicemail meant for your affair partner." Instead, I opened my voice memos app and played her message again, this time recording it on a second device. If I was going crazy, if there was some innocent explanation, fine. But if my mother was betraying the man who'd reorganized his entire life around caring for her, I needed proof. And I needed to know who the hell Richard was. The usual place. She'd said, the usual place. Which meant this wasn't the first time. I didn't sleep. By 6 a.m., I was parked outside my parents' house with coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, watching Dad's morning routine through the kitchen window. He moved around their familiar space like a choreographed dance, starting the coffee maker, setting out Mom's pills in a little weekly organizer, checking the locks on doors and windows that Mom sometimes tried to open in confusion. Except now I wondered, were those moments of confusion real, or just convenient cover? At 7:23 a.m., Dad emerged in his worn Georgetown sweatshirt to grab the newspaper. His hair stuck up in the back, something Mom used to fix automatically every morning. Now she either didn't notice or didn't care. "Ryan." He spotted my car and walked over, concern creasing his face. "Everything okay? You look terrible." I did look terrible. I checked in my rearview mirror. Couldn't sleep. Work stuff. Thought maybe I'd take you guys to breakfast. His face lit up in a way that made my stomach churn with guilt. "That would be great. Mom's having another good morning. She remembered your middle name earlier without me prompting." He paused. "Actually, she's been having more good days lately. Maybe the new supplements are helping. Or maybe she's not as sick as we thought." The thought felt like poison in my mind, but I couldn't shake it. Inside, Mom was dressed and sitting at the kitchen table, working on a crossword puzzle. Her handwriting was neat, controlled. When she looked up at me, her eyes were clear and focused. "Ryan, sweetheart. What a nice surprise." She stood and hugged me, and I found myself analyzing everything, the firmness of her grip, the way she didn't hesitate with my name, how she smelled like her usual perfume instead of the confused, medicated haze I'd grown accustomed to. "How are you feeling today, Mom?" "Oh, you know." She waved a hand vaguely. "Some days are better than others. Yesterday I couldn't remember where I put my reading glasses. Found them in the refrigerator of all places." She laughed, but something in her tone felt rehearsed. Dad squeezed her shoulder. "The important thing is you're having more good moments. Dr. Patterson says that's normal, the disease doesn't progress in a straight line." I watched Mom's face carefully when he mentioned the doctor. Was that relief flickering across her features? "Speaking of Dr. Patterson," I said casually, "didn't you have an appointment this week?" "Thursday," Dad answered quickly. "Though she might reschedule. You know how she gets anxious about medical appointments lately." Mom nodded along, but I caught something. A micro-expression. Annoyance, maybe. Like Dad was speaking for her when she was perfectly capable of answering herself. "Actually," Mom said, her voice taking on that vague, confused quality I'd heard so many times before, "I think, wasn't it Wednesday? Or maybe." She pressed her fingers to her temples. "I'm sorry, I get so mixed up. The performance was flawless. If I hadn't heard that voicemail, I would have felt the familiar pang of sympathy, the helpless ache of watching someone you love lose pieces of themselves. Instead, I felt sick." "It's okay, honey," Dad soothed, rubbing her back. "I keep track of the appointments. That's what I'm here for." She leaned into him, and for a moment she looked genuinely vulnerable. But then I caught her checking the kitchen clock, 11:18 a.m. The gesture was quick, furtive. Like someone with somewhere to be. You know what, I said, standing abruptly, I just remembered I have a conference call I can't miss. Rain, check on breakfast. Of course, Dad said, but I could see the disappointment. Feel better, sweetheart, Mom added. You work too hard. I kissed them both goodbye, my heart hammering. As I reached my car, I turned back to see Mom watching me from the kitchen window. When our eyes met, she smiled and waved. But she'd been watching. Making sure I actually left. Now I just had to figure out where the usual place was. I spent the next 2 hours driving around town like a stalker, checking every place that could be the usual place for a secret affair. The parking lot behind Starbucks where Mom used to meet her book club. The bench by Miller's Pond where she and Dad had their first date 30 years ago. Using their spot felt like an extra betrayal, but I checked anyway. The medical plaza where Dr. Patterson's office was located. Nothing. No sign of Mom's silver Honda Civic anywhere. By 1:30 p.m., I was parked outside Riverside Diner, debating whether to give up, when my phone rang. Dad. Ryan. I'm sorry to bother you, but have you heard from your mother? My blood turned to ice water. What do you mean? She went to run errands around noon, said she'd be back by 1 for lunch. That was almost 2 hours ago. His voice carried that particular strain I'd learned to recognize, the controlled panic of someone trying not to catastrophize. I've called her cell 4 times. It goes straight to voicemail. Maybe her battery died. I offered weakly. Maybe. He didn't sound convinced. It's just, with the confusion lately, I worry about her driving. Last week she got lost coming back from the grocery store. Ended up in Millfield somehow, 20 minutes in the wrong direction. Millfield. The neighboring town where nobody would recognize her. I'm sure she's fine, Dad. You know how she loses track of time. You're right. I'm probably overreacting. A pause. Dr. Patterson says anxiety is normal for caregivers. I can't help imagining her pulled over somewhere, not remembering how to get home. The guilt was eating me alive. Here was my father, terrified that his wife was lost and confused, while I knew she was probably meeting her lover somewhere I hadn't thought to look yet. Dad, why don't I drive around and see if I can spot her car? You stay home in case she comes back. Would you? That would really help. I'll text you the license plate number. After I hung up, I sat in my car feeling like the worst son in the world. But I also felt something else, determination. Because now I knew Mom's pattern. She left during the day when Dad expected her to run errands. She turned off her phone. And she went somewhere far enough away that she wouldn't be recognized. I drove toward Millfield with my stomach in knots. The town was small, maybe 15 minutes to drive from one end to the other. I started with the obvious places, restaurants, coffee shops, the small park by the river. Nothing. Then, as I turned down Maple Street, I saw it. Mom's Honda was parked behind a small motel called the Pine Lodge. Not the parking lot, behind it, partially hidden by a dumpster where it wouldn't be visible from the main road. My hands shook as I pulled into the gas station across the street. The Pine Lodge was the kind of place you stayed when you were either broke or didn't want to be seen. Faded blue paint, rooms that opened directly to the parking lot, a neon sign missing half its letters. I'd found the usual place. Through my windshield, I watched the motel's second-floor walkway. Room 237 had a "Do Not Disturb" sign hanging on the door, and the curtains were drawn tight. I couldn't see inside, but something told me that was the room. My phone buzzed with another text from Dad, still no word from Mom. Getting really worried now. The timestamp read 2:47 p.m. She'd been here for over 2 hours. I reached for my voice recorder app, then hesitated. Once I started recording, there would be no going back. No way to pretend I'd never found this place, never suspected anything. But Dad was at home, pacing and checking his phone every 30 seconds, imagining his wife lost and scared. I hit record and started walking toward room 237. I made it halfway across the parking lot before the door to room 237 opened. A man stepped out, tall, silver-haired, wearing a navy polo shirt and khakis. He looked like he belonged at a country club, not a seedy motel. Mid-50s, maybe older. Definitely not someone I recognized. My heart hammered as I ducked behind a maintenance shed, phone still recording in my sweaty palm. The man, Richard, presumably, checked his watch and knocked softly on the door. A pattern. 2 short, 3 long, 1 short. The door opened immediately. Mom appeared, and my world tilted sideways. She wasn't confused or disheveled. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup fresh. She was wearing the blue dress Dad had bought her for their anniversary last year, the one she claimed she couldn't remember receiving when he'd asked her to wear it to dinner last month. I was starting to worry, Richard said, pulling her close. You said you'd be here by 1. David was being clingy today. Mom's voice carried clearly across the empty lot. I had to wait for him to get distracted by his crossword puzzle. They kissed. Not a peck between friends, but the kind of kiss that spoke of familiarity and longing. I pressed myself harder against the shed, fighting the urge to vomit. How much time do we have? Richard asked, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. Maybe an hour. I told him I was grocery shopping, but if I'm gone too long, he'll start calling. She laughed, but it sounded bitter. He's got me on such a tight leash now. Barely lets me out of his sight. Because he thinks you're sick. Because he thinks I'm losing my mind. Mom's tone shifted, becoming sharper. Do you know what it's like, Richard? Pretending to be confused about things I remember perfectly. Acting grateful when he reminds me of my own son's name. My legs nearly gave out. She was pretending. All of it, the blank stares, the forgotten words, the moments of not recognizing us. Performance. It won't be much longer, Richard said, stroking her hair. Once the dementia progresses far enough, we can move him to that memory care facility we discussed. The insurance will cover it, and then... Then what? Mom pulled back slightly. I spend the rest of my life pretending to be someone I'm not. Richard, some days I forget what's real and what's act anymore. Insurance. Memory care facility. They weren't just having an affair, they were planning Dad's entire future around Mom's fake diagnosis. We've been through this, Linda. It's the only way we can be together without destroying your relationship with Ryan or dealing with a messy divorce. Richard cupped her face in his hands. David gets excellent care, you get to maintain your relationship with your son, and we get each other. Everyone wins. Everyone except David, Mom said quietly. David will be fine. He'll probably be happier not having to worry about taking care of you anymore. The casual cruelty in his voice made my hands clench into fists. This man was talking about destroying my father's life like it was a minor inconvenience. Mom must have seen something in my expression, or maybe she sensed movement, because her head turned toward my hiding spot. For a split second, our eyes met across the parking lot. Her face went white. Linda. Richard followed her gaze. What is it? I had maybe 3 seconds before he spotted me. 3 seconds to decide whether to run, confront them, or keep hiding and gather more evidence. My phone was still recording. I could hear Dad's voice in my head from this morning. She remembered your middle name without me prompting. She'd never forgotten my middle name. She'd been testing herself, making sure her performance was convincing. Nothing, Mom said quickly, but her voice shook. I thought I saw, never mind. David will be expecting me soon. But she kept staring at the shed where I crouched, her face a mask of growing panic. I held my breath, pressed against the maintenance shed like my life depended on it. Mom's eyes kept darting toward my hiding spot while she tried to maintain normal conversation with Richard, but her voice had that tight quality it got when she was panicking. You seem distracted, Richard said, his hand sliding down her arm. Maybe we should go back inside. Actually, I should probably head home soon. David gets suspicious if I'm gone too long, and I still need to actually buy groceries to make my story believable. Since when do you worry about David being suspicious? Richard's tone had shifted, becoming more alert. Linda, what's going on? Before she could answer, my phone started ringing. The sound cut through the afternoon air like a siren, and there was no way they hadn't heard it. I fumbled to silence it, but the damage was done. Richard's head snapped toward the shed. What the hell was that? I looked at my screen, Dad calling. Of course it was Dad, probably worried sick and wanting an update on whether I'd found any sign of Mom. The irony would have been funny if I wasn't about to be discovered crouching behind a dumpster at a seedy motel. It's probably just someone in one of the rooms, Mom said quickly, but I could hear the desperation in her voice. Richard wasn't buying it. He took a step toward the shed, his posture changing from relaxed to predatory. Stay here. That's when I made a decision that was either brilliant or incredibly stupid. I stood up. Hello, Mom. The words came out steadier than I felt. Mom's face crumpled like I'd slapped her, while Richard stopped dead in his tracks, clearly trying to calculate how much trouble he was in. Ryan. Mom's voice was barely a whisper. What are you doing here? I held up my phone, making sure they could both see the recording app was still running. Getting answers. Though I think I've heard enough. Richard recovered first, stepping protectively in front of Mom. I don't know what you think you heard, but I think I heard you two planning to have my father committed to a memory care facility based on a fake dementia diagnosis. My voice was getting louder, anger overriding my shock. I think I heard my mother admit she's been pretending to be confused for months while my dad kills himself trying to take care of her. Ryan, please, Mom stepped around Richard, her hands outstretched like she was approaching a dangerous animal. You don't understand. It's complicated. Complicated? I laughed, but it came out harsh and bitter. Dad called me 20 minutes ago, terrified that you were lost somewhere, not remembering how to get home. He's probably pacing around the kitchen right now, checking his phone every 30 seconds and blaming himself for letting you drive alone. Mom flinched like I'd hit her. Good. Richard, meanwhile, had apparently decided to go on the offensive. Look, kid, I get that this is a shock, but your parents' marriage has been over for years. Your mother deserves to be happy. Don't. I pointed at him, my hands shaking with rage. Don't you dare talk to me about what my mother deserves. And don't call me kid. Richard, stop, Mom said sharply. Then, to me, how did you find us? You left me a voicemail last night. Meant for him, I assume. I looked directly at Richard. You really should be more careful with your girlfriend's phone, Dick. Can I call you Dick? His jaw tightened. It's Richard. I'll stick with Dick. My phone started ringing again, Dad, still worried. I declined the call, but not before Mom saw the name on the screen. Oh God, she breathed. He's looking for me. Yeah, he is. Because that's what people who actually love someone do when they're worried. I looked between them, disgust rising in my throat. How long has this been going on? Mom and Richard exchanged a look that spoke of years, not months. 2 years, Mom said quietly. 2 years. I repeated the words, trying to process them. So when Dad got that promotion and we all celebrated at Russo's, you were already cheating on him. When he surprised you with that weekend trip to Asheville for your birthday, you were already planning to have him committed. It wasn't supposed to happen this way, Mom said, tears starting to fall. Richard and I met at that grief counseling group after his wife died. We were just friends at first. When did the dementia act start? Another pause. More silent communication between them. 6 months ago, Richard answered when Mom couldn't. Linda was going to ask for a divorce, but then your father started talking about retirement, about all the things they'd do together. She couldn't bear to hurt him. So instead you decided to drive him insane. My phone was buzzing with text messages now, definitely Dad, probably panicking. This is so much worse than just leaving him. You don't understand, Mom said, her voice breaking. I never meant for it to go this far. The first time I pretended to forget something, it was just. I panicked when David almost caught me texting Richard. I said I was confused about who was calling. And then you realized how useful that confusion could be, I said. Richard stepped closer to Mom, his hand finding her elbow. The possessive gesture made my skin crawl. Your mother is in an impossible situation. She loves your father, but she's not in love with him anymore. This way, everyone gets what they need. Everyone except Dad, who's spending his retirement money on supplements and medical consultations for a disease you don't have. I pulled up my text messages, 7 missed calls and 4 increasingly frantic texts from Dad. He joined 2 different caregiver support groups, Mom. He cries to me about losing you piece by piece. Mom sobbed openly now, mascara running down her cheeks. I know. God, I know how much I'm hurting him. But Richard's right, if I just left, it would destroy David. At least this way, he gets to be the hero. He gets to feel like he's taking care of me. By lying to him every single day. Yes. Mom's voice cracked. By lying to him every day because the truth would be so much worse. Do you think it's easy pretending to forget my own life? Do you know what it's like to act grateful when he cuts my food into smaller pieces, or to pretend I don't remember our anniversary? My phone started ringing again. This time I answered. Ryan, thank God. Dad's voice was tight with panic. I called the police. They said they can't file a missing persons report until she's been gone longer, but I'm scared something happened. What if she had an accident? What if she's sitting in her car somewhere, not remembering where she is? I looked at Mom, who had gone pale listening to Dad's terrified voice through the speaker. Richard was checking his watch, probably calculating how long they had before this became a bigger problem. Dad, I've been calling the hospitals, Dad continued, his words tumbling over each other. Mercy General, St. Mary's, even the one in Millfield. No one's seen her. Ryan, what if I should have gone with her? What if this is my fault for letting her drive alone? Mom doubled over like she was in physical pain. Turn it off, she whispered. Please, turn it off. But I kept the call connected. Dad, what hospital in Millfield? Millfield General. It's where they took her when she had that panic attack last month, remember? She got confused at the grocery store and couldn't find her car. His voice broke slightly. The doctor there said confusion episodes were normal, that I shouldn't worry unless they got more frequent. I stared at Mom. You went to the hospital in Millfield? She nodded miserably. I needed medical documentation. For the insurance pre-approvals Richard mentioned. If I was going to eventually put David in memory care, I needed a paper trail showing my condition was deteriorating. The scope of the deception hit me like a physical blow. She hadn't just been lying to Dad, she'd been lying to doctors, creating false medical records, building an entire fictional narrative around a disease she didn't have. Ryan? Dad's voice came through the phone. Are you still there? Did you find anything? Richard was making urgent hand gestures at Mom, pointing to his car. He wanted to leave. Of course he did, this was probably more drama than he'd signed up for when he decided to pursue a married woman. Dad, I said carefully, what would you do if Mom was having an affair? The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. What kind of question is that? Dad finally asked, his voice different now. Smaller. A hypothetical one. Ryan, did you find something? Is that why you're asking? Mom was shaking her head frantically, tears streaming down her face. Richard had his car keys out now, clearly ready to abandon ship. Dad, what would you do? Another long pause. When Dad spoke again, his voice was barely audible. I'd want to know the truth. Even if it killed me, I'd want to know. The words hung in the air between us like a death sentence. Dad's voice through the phone speaker, barely a whisper, I'd want to know the truth. Even if it killed me, I'd want to know. Mom collapsed against the motel room door, her perfectly styled hair falling across her face. Richard grabbed her arm, trying to pull her toward his car, a black BMW parked 3 spaces down from Mom's Honda. We need to go, Richard hissed. This is getting out of hand. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Dad, I need you to sit down. Ryan, you're scaring me. What's going on? I looked directly at Mom as I spoke. I found her. She's fine. She's at the Pine Lodge Motel in Millfield with a man named Richard. The sound that came through the phone wasn't quite human. It started as a sharp intake of breath and ended as something between a groan and a whimper. In the background, I heard something crash, probably a coffee mug hitting their kitchen floor. Dad? Are you okay? The Pine Lodge. His voice was mechanical now, like he was reading from a script. The motel on Maple Street. You know it? Yes. I had to pick up a client's car there once. Insurance claim. A pause. Richard who? I looked at Mom's lover, this silver-haired man who'd been planning my father's institutionalization like a business transaction. I don't know his last name. Brennan, Mom whispered, so quietly I almost missed it. Richard Brennan. Dad made that inhuman sound again. Dick Brennan. From the grief counseling group. You know him. The betrayal somehow got worse. This wasn't just some stranger Mom had met, this was someone Dad knew, someone who'd sat in those support group meetings listening to Dad talk about his fears and hopes while secretly planning to destroy his life. He lost his wife to early-onset Alzheimer's 2 years ago, Dad said, his voice completely flat now. Linda held my hand during his goodbye speech. Said she couldn't imagine what he was going through. Richard, Dick, had the grace to look ashamed for exactly 3 seconds before his expression hardened into something ugly. David needs to understand that Linda made her choice. This isn't about hurting anyone. I held the phone closer to my mouth. Dad, did you hear that? I heard it. Dad's voice was different now. Colder than I'd ever heard it. Put your mother on the phone. Mom shook her head violently, backing away from me like the phone was radioactive. I can't. Ryan, please, I can't talk to him right now. She says she can't talk to you right now. She can't talk to me. Dad repeated the words like he was learning a foreign language. After 31 years of marriage, she can't talk to me. My phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. Tell your father I'm sorry. This isn't how I wanted him to find out. Linda. She was texting me while standing 10 feet away, rather than speak to her own husband. The cowardice was breathtaking. She just texted me, I told Dad. Says she's sorry and this isn't how she wanted you to find out. How did she want me to find out? Dad's voice cracked. When you and Richard had me committed to Shady Pines with a fake dementia diagnosis. Dick stepped forward, his jaw tight. It's not fake. Linda has been experiencing genuine episodes of confusion, Anne. Shut up, I snapped. I heard you two talking about insurance coverage and memory care facilities. I heard her admit she's been pretending. Dad, I said into the phone, they've been planning this for months. She's been faking the dementia symptoms to build a medical paper trail. The panic attack at Millfield General last month. That was part of it. The silence stretched for almost 30 seconds. When Dad finally spoke, his voice was so quiet I had to strain to hear him. The crossword puzzle this morning. She knew all the answers. I thought she was having a good day. A bitter laugh. There are no good days or bad days, are there? Just days when she feels like performing and days when she doesn't. Mom was sobbing now, her shoulders shaking as she slumped against Dick's car. He had his arm around her, whispering something in her ear, but she wasn't responding. Dad, what do you want me to do? Come home, he said simply. And bring the recording. The drive home felt like a funeral procession. Mom followed behind me in her Honda while Dick had disappeared the moment Dad asked me to bring her back. Apparently his devotion only extended so far as hotel rooms and secret phone calls. Some night in shining armor. Dad was waiting on the front porch when we pulled into the driveway at 4:17 p.m. He sat perfectly still in the wicker chair Mom had bought him for Father's Day 3 years ago, still wearing his Georgetown sweatshirt, hands folded in his lap like he was at a job interview. The coffee mug he dropped was nowhere to be seen, but I could see wet spots on his shirt where he tried to clean up. Mom sat in her car for almost 2 minutes after I parked, gripping the steering wheel and staring at the house like it might collapse if she looked away. When she finally got out, her legs were so unsteady she had to lean against the car door. David, she said as we reached the porch steps. Her voice was back to that fragile, confused tone she perfected over the past 6 months. I'm so sorry I worried you. I got turned around, Anne. Don't. Dad's voice cut through her performance like a blade. Please don't insult me by pretending to be confused right now. Ryan played me the recording. Mom's carefully constructed mask crumbled immediately. Without the dementia act, she just looked like what she was, a middle-aged woman who'd been caught in an elaborate lie. Her hands dropped to her sides and for the first time in months, she stood at her full height instead of the slightly hunched posture she'd adopted to seem more fragile. How long have you known? Dad asked, looking at me instead of her. Since last night. She left me a voicemail meant for him. And you went looking for them instead of coming to me first. The disappointment in his voice was worse than anger would have been. Dad, I needed to be sure. I needed proof. You needed proof that your mother was capable of this level of deception. He finally looked at Mom, and I saw her flinch under his gaze. 31 years, Linda. I reorganized my entire retirement around taking care of you. I researched every supplement, every therapy, every clinical trial for early onset dementia. David, please. I joined those support groups. Do you know what I told them? I told them my biggest fear was that you'd stop recognizing me completely. That I'd lose you piece by piece until there was nothing left. His voice stayed level, but I could see his hands shaking slightly. I told them I'd rather die than watch you disappear. Mom was crying again, but quietly this time. I never meant for it to go this far. When did it start? The real answer this time. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her makeup. The first time I pretended to forget something. 8 months ago. You almost caught me deleting text messages from Richard, and I panicked. I said I was confused about how to use the phone. 8 months. Dad repeated it like he was trying to solve a math problem. So when I bought you that new phone with the larger buttons because I thought the regular one was too complicated, you just went along with it. Yes. And the medication reminders. The pill organizers. I didn't need them. The medical alert bracelet I got you for Christmas. Mom's voice broke. I threw it away. I was afraid someone would see it who knew Richard. Dad stood up slowly, like his joints had stiffened while sitting there. I need to see the recording, Ryan. I hesitated. Dad, you've heard enough. You don't need to. I need to hear all of it. Everything they said. We went inside, and I played the entire recording from the motel parking lot. Dad sat at their kitchen table, the same one where I'd watched him cut Mom's food into smaller pieces just days ago, and listened to his wife discuss his future institutionalization with the clinical detachment of someone planning a vacation. When it finished, the silence felt thick enough to cut. Memory care at Willowbrook costs $8,400 a month, Dad said finally. I looked into it last week because I wanted to be prepared for when your condition got worse. Our insurance would cover 60% after the deductible. Mom stared at her hands. I was going to cash in my 401k early to cover the difference. Take the penalty hit. I figured your health was more important than my retirement plans. David, I'm so sorry. How long were you planning to keep this up, Linda? Until I was actually in Willowbrook. Until Ryan started visiting me there, thinking his mother was too sick to take care of me anymore. The question hung in the air like smoke. Because that was exactly what they'd been planning. Dad walked to the kitchen counter and picked up a manila folder I hadn't noticed before. His movements were deliberate, controlled, the same way he'd organized Mom's pill schedules and doctor appointments for the past 8 months. I made some calls after Ryan told me where you were, he said, opening the folder. Starting with Dr. Patterson. Mom went rigid. David, what did you? I told her I was concerned about potential medication interactions and wanted to review your complete medical history. Dad pulled out several printed pages. Interesting thing about medical records, Linda. They're very detailed when the symptoms are real. He spread the papers across the kitchen table like he was laying out evidence at a crime scene. Your first appointment with Dr. Patterson was 7 months ago. You complained of memory lapses and confusion. She noted that your cognitive tests were inconsistent with typical early-stage dementia patterns. I watched Mom's face drain of color. The second appointment, you scored significantly lower on the same tests. Dr. Patterson noted it was unusual for such rapid decline without corresponding brain imaging changes. She recommended an MRI. Which you cancelled, Dad continued, pulling out another sheet. Twice. Said you were too anxious about enclosed spaces. Dr. Patterson noted in her records that your anxiety about the MRI seemed disproportionate and possibly manufactured. Mom stood abruptly, knocking over her chair. I need some air. This is too much. Sit down, Linda. Dad's voice carried an authority I'd never heard before. We're not finished. She sat. Dr. Patterson called me back 20 minutes ago. She's been concerned about your case for months. The symptoms you described never matched what she observed during appointments, and several times you demonstrated perfect recall about things you'd previously claimed to forget. Dad turned to a page covered in yellow highlights. August 15th, patient claimed she couldn't remember her son's birthday, then casually mentioned making dinner reservations for the following Tuesday, which was Ryan's birthday. September 3rd, patient said she was confused about current date, then accurately referenced a news event from that morning. My stomach dropped. I remembered both of those incidents. I'd felt so sorry for Mom, so frustrated by the cruel randomness of her disease. The birthday thing had made me cry in my car afterward. Dr. Patterson suspected you were either malingering or experiencing a psychiatric condition that was causing you to believe you had symptoms you didn't actually have. Dad looked directly at Mom. She was trying to protect both of us by not voicing her suspicions directly. There's more, Dad said, turning to fresh pages. I called Millfield General about your panic attack last month. Nurse practitioners are required to document any inconsistencies in patient presentations. Mom made a small sound like air leaving a balloon. The attending physician noted that your confusion about basic personal information seemed performative and that you demonstrated selective memory loss that didn't align with any known neurological condition. They ran a complete blood panel and cognitive assessment. Everything came back normal. Dad closed the folder with deliberate care. The hospital social worker flagged your case for possible elder abuse. They thought I might be drugging you or manipulating you into believing you were sicker than you were. The room felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out of it. They've been watching me, Linda. For 3 months, Millfield General has had my name flagged in their system as a potential elder abuser because my wife's symptoms made no medical sense. Dad's voice finally cracked. Do you understand what you've done? You didn't just betray our marriage. You made medical professionals think I was poisoning you. Mom buried her face in her hands. I didn't know. Richard never said anything about medical reviews or... Richard knew, Dad said quietly. His wife actually had Alzheimer's. He knew exactly what real dementia looks like, and he knew you were faking it. Dad pulled out one more sheet from his folder, this one printed on different letterhead. I also called Richard Brennan directly. Mom's head snapped up, her eyes wide with panic. You talked to Richard? Oh yes. We had a very enlightening conversation. Dad's smile was cold as winter. Turns out Dick has been quite busy these past 2 years. You weren't his first grieving widow, Linda. My blood went cold. What do you mean? Dad turned the paper toward us. It was a printout from some kind of legal database. Richard Brennan has been named in 3 separate civil suits in the past 5 years. All involving inappropriate relationships with emotionally vulnerable women receiving grief counseling. That's not, Mom started, but Dad held up a hand. The first was Margaret Chen, 62, whose husband died of cancer. Richard convinced her to liquidate her retirement accounts to invest in his consulting business. She lost $127,000 before her daughter intervened. Dad's finger traced down the page. The second was Patricia Williams, 58, widowed after a car accident. Richard moved in as her caregiver and systematically isolated her from her family while draining her bank accounts. I stared at Mom, watching the realization dawn on her face. Mom, did you give him money? Not money, exactly, she whispered. What exactly? Dad answered for her. I checked our accounts this morning. Our joint savings is missing $23,000. Withdrawn in increments over the past 4 months. Richard needed help with his mother's medical bills, Mom said weakly. She's in hospice care in Florida, and... Richard's mother died in 2019, Dad said flatly. I found her obituary online. Took me exactly 3 minutes on Google. The kitchen felt like it was spinning. This wasn't just an affair, Mom had been conned by a professional predator who specialized in exploiting vulnerable women. There's more, Dad continued, his voice getting harder. The third lawsuit was filed 8 months ago by the family of Janet Morrison, 64. Richard convinced Janet that her early-stage dementia was worse than it actually was. Told her she needed to be in a care facility for her own safety. My stomach lurched. Like what he was planning for you. Exactly like that. Except Janet's family got suspicious when Richard tried to get himself named as her healthcare proxy. Dad's eyes never left Mom's face. Janet's son found them together at a motel in Riverside County. Sound familiar? Mom was trembling now, her hands shaking so violently she had to clasp them together. He said he loved me. He said we were going to build a life together once you were settled somewhere safe. He said the same thing to Margaret, Patricia, and Janet, Dad replied. Right up until their money ran out or their families got involved. Then he disappeared. I pulled out my phone and started searching for Richard Brennan. Mom, what's his middle name? Where does he live? Robert. Richard Robert Brennan. He has an apartment on Elm Street, but he's been looking at houses in North Carolina. Said we could move there together once. She trailed off, finally understanding what once meant. My search results populated immediately. Jesus Christ. Mom, this guy has been arrested twice in the past 3 years for elder fraud. He's currently out on bail for bilking a 70-year-old woman in Tennessee out of her life savings. That's impossible, Mom said, but her voice held no conviction. He showed me pictures of his mother in the hospital. He cried when he talked about her medical bills. Stock photos, Dad said matter-of-factly. I reverse-searched the image you showed me on your phone last week. It's from a medical supply company's website. Mom doubled over like she'd been punched. Oh God. Oh my God, what have I done? My phone started buzzing with an unknown number. We all stared at it. That's him, Mom whispered. That's Richard's number. I looked at Dad. Answer it, he said. I answered the call and put it on speaker. Linda, sweetheart, I've been trying to reach you for hours. Richard's voice filled our kitchen, smooth and concerned. I was worried after your son showed up at the motel. Are you alright? Mom stared at the phone like it was a venomous snake. Dad gestured for her to respond. I'm fine, Richard. Her voice came out strangled. Good. Listen, I think we need to accelerate our timeline. Your son recording us changes things. We can't wait for the insurance pre-approvals anymore. Dad's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. What do you mean? Mom asked. I mean we need to get David into Willowbrook this week. I've already spoken to Dr. Patterson's office, told them I was calling on your behalf because you were too distraught to handle the arrangements yourself. They're expediting the psychiatric evaluation. My blood ran cold. Psychiatric evaluation. Richard's voice continued, oblivious to the fact that Dad and I were listening. Once David's committed for a 72-hour evaluation based on his inability to cope with your deteriorating condition, we can have him declared mentally incompetent. The stress-induced breakdown narrative will be perfect, devoted husband snaps under caregiver pressure. Dad went absolutely rigid beside me. I don't understand, Mom whispered. It's simple, darling. David becomes the patient instead of you. We present evidence that he's been projecting his own mental decline onto you, possibly even drugging you to make you appear confused. The hospital already suspects him of elder abuse, this just confirms their suspicions. The room started spinning. Richard wasn't just planning to have Dad committed based on Mom's fake dementia, he was going to flip the entire script and make Dad the sick one. Richard, I never agreed to. Linda, listen to me carefully. His voice hardened. Your son has evidence of our relationship. If this comes out without the proper context, you'll lose everything, your house, your relationship with Ryan, your reputation. But if David is declared incompetent due to a stress-induced psychotic break, you become the sympathetic wife whose husband lost his mind trying to care for her. Mom looked at Dad with horror dawning in her eyes. You want me to have my husband committed for a mental breakdown he's not having? I want us to be together without destroying your life in the process, Richard snapped. Jesus, Linda, do you want to explain to your son why you've been lying to everyone for 8 months? Do you want the whole town knowing you abandoned your marriage for a man you met in grief counseling? Dad stood up slowly and walked to where Mom sat frozen at the table. For a moment, I thought he might comfort her, put his arm around her the way he had thousands of times before. Instead, he leaned down and spoke directly into the phone. Hello, Dick. The silence stretched for 15 seconds before Richard's voice came back, all pretense of smoothness gone. David. Linda said you weren't home. Funny thing about lies, Dick. They have a way of multiplying. Dad's voice was conversational, almost friendly. I'm curious, when you have me committed this week, what happens to the $23,000 you've already taken from our savings account? Another pause. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. You also probably don't know that I've spent the past 2 hours on the phone with Detective Morrison from the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. Janet Morrison was his aunt. The phone went dead silent. Still there, Dick. Detective Morrison was very interested to hear about your new girlfriend in Millfield. Apparently, there's a warrant out for your arrest in North Carolina. Something about forged medical documents and healthcare fraud. When Richard spoke again, his voice had changed completely, harder, uglier, stripped of all pretense. You have no idea what you're interfering with, David. I have a pretty good idea, Dad replied calmly. The question is, are you going to return our money voluntarily, or should I let Detective Morrison handle this through official channels? Go to hell. The line went dead. Dad calmly hung up the phone and turned to Mom, who looked like she was about to be sick. Linda, I need you to call your bank right now and report the unauthorized withdrawals. I can't, she whispered. I authorized them. I signed the transfer forms. Under fraudulent pretenses, I said, finally finding my voice. Mom, this guy is a professional con artist. You're a victim here too. But Dad held up a hand, his expression unreadable. Actually, Ryan, let's think about this carefully. Linda made deliberate choices over the course of 8 months. She created false medical records, lied to doctors, and participated in planning my institutionalization. His voice stayed level, but I could see the muscle in his jaw twitching. The money transfers might be the least of our problems. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your father has no idea who he's dealing with. This isn't over. RB. I showed the screen to Dad, whose face darkened. Screenshot that and forwarded it to Detective Morrison. I gave him your number as a secondary contact. Mom stood abruptly, swaying slightly. I need to fix this. I need to call Dr. Patterson and tell her the truth about everything. Sit down, Dad said sharply. You're not calling anyone until we figure out exactly how deep this goes. He walked to their home office and returned with a thick folder I'd never seen before. While you were at the motel today, I did more than just call doctors and detectives. I called our attorney, our insurance company, and our financial advisor. The folder hit the kitchen table with a solid thud. Linda, did you sign anything else for Richard? Any legal documents, insurance forms, power of attorney paperwork? Mom's face went white. Last month, he said we needed to prepare for the future. He had some papers. What kind of papers? I don't remember exactly. Something about medical directives and financial planning for couples dealing with dementia. Her voice got smaller. He said it was just preliminary paperwork to have ready when we needed it. Dad opened his folder and pulled out several official-looking documents. These are the papers you signed, Linda. Richard filed them with the county clerk's office yesterday. I leaned over to read the headers. My blood turned to ice. Mom, you signed papers declaring Dad mentally incompetent and giving Richard Brennan power of attorney over your medical and financial decisions. That's impossible, Mom breathed, but she was already reaching for the papers with shaking hands. Page 3, Dad said grimly. You also signed a statement saying you feared for your safety due to my increasingly erratic behavior and potential for violence. Mom stared at the signature, definitely hers, and made a strangled sound. He said it was insurance paperwork. He showed me where to sign, said it was just in case something happened to me. My phone rang. Detective Morrison's name appeared on the screen. Mr. Hayes. This is Detective Morrison. I need you and your family to listen very carefully. We've been tracking Richard Brennan for 6 months, and you've just walked into the middle of an active investigation. I put the call on speaker, and Dad gestured for Mom to sit back down. Richard Brennan is wanted in connection with a dozen elder fraud cases across 4 states, Detective Morrison continued. But more importantly, we have reason to believe he's escalating. His last victim in Tennessee was found dead in her home 3 days after she threatened to expose him. Mom let out a small scream. Dead? You mean he killed her? We can't prove that yet, but Martha Williams died of an apparent medication overdose. The same day she was scheduled to testify against him in court. The kitchen felt like it was closing in around us. This wasn't just fraud anymore. Detective, Dad said, his voice steady despite everything, what do we need to do? First, don't go anywhere alone. Any of you. Second, we're going to need Mrs. Hayes to help us set up a controlled meeting with Brennan. And third. Detective Morrison paused. We're going to need to move fast. Richard Brennan just bought a one-way ticket to Mexico. Flight leaves tomorrow night. The motel room at the Pine Lodge felt different at 9 p.m. with 2 undercover detectives, a wire taped to my chest, and my mother practicing her lines like she was rehearsing for the worst play ever written. Remember, Detective Morrison said for the 3rd time, adjusting the tiny microphone clipped inside my jacket collar, we need him to confirm the power of attorney fraud on tape. Get him to talk about the forged medical documents. And if he mentions Martha Williams or anyone else, let him keep talking. Mom sat on the edge of the bed, her hands twisted in her lap. She'd aged 10 years in the past 6 hours. What if he knows it's a setup? What if he doesn't come? He'll come, Detective Rodriguez said from her position by the window. His flight to Mexico isn't until tomorrow at 11:47 p.m. He needs that power of attorney paperwork to access your accounts from out of the country. Right now, you're his only path to the money. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard, room 237. 20 minutes. Come alone or this gets complicated for your family. He's coming, I announced, my voice steadier than I felt. Dad was back at the house with 2 patrol officers, officially for his protection but really because Detective Morrison didn't trust him not to try something heroic. Your father's been holding it together remarkably well, Morrison had told me earlier, but men his age sometimes make poor decisions when they feel their family's been threatened. I could hear everything through my earpiece as Mom knocked on the door, 2 short, 3 long, 1 short. The same pattern I'd witnessed that afternoon, which felt like a lifetime ago. Richard opened the door immediately, and I was struck again by how normal he looked. Country club normal. The kind of man you'd trust with your insurance claim or your mother's medical decisions. Thank God you're here, he said, pulling Mom into the room. After that disaster this afternoon, I thought we were finished. Ryan has the recording, Mom said, sticking to her script. But I think I can convince him to delete it if we move forward with the Willowbrook plan immediately. I was positioned in the maintenance closet across the parking lot, watching through a crack in the door while Detective Rodriguez monitored from an unmarked van. The wire was picking up everything clearly. What exactly did Ryan hear? Richard asked. Everything. Our whole conversation about moving David to memory care, about the insurance covering the costs. Mom's voice wavered slightly. He knows about the fake medical records. Richard was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him calculating through the window. That's actually not necessarily a problem. Ryan wants to protect his father, right? We can use that. What do you mean? Simple. We tell Ryan that his father is sicker than anyone realizes. That David's been projecting his own cognitive decline onto you, maybe even tampering with your medication to make you seem confused. Richard's voice got smoother, more confident. The boy's already seen his mother supposedly losing her mind for 8 months. How hard would it be to convince him his father's been the unstable one all along? I felt sick listening to him manipulate the narrative in real time. The power of attorney papers you signed yesterday are going to be crucial, Richard continued. Once those are filed properly, I can have David committed for a psychiatric evaluation based on his documented history of elder abuse. Documented history? Mom's confusion wasn't acting. Linda, sweetie, Millfield General has had your husband flagged for 3 months. Dr. Patterson has notes about inconsistencies in your symptoms. When I present the timeline correctly, it'll look like David was systematically poisoning you or manipulating your medication to create the dementia symptoms. Through my earpiece, I heard Detective Morrison whisper, perfect. Keep him talking about the medical fraud. But the doctors will figure out I was never really sick, Mom said. Richard laughed, and the sound made my skin crawl. By the time they figure it out, we'll be in Cabo San Lucas, and David will be locked in a 72-hour psych hold that could easily become permanent once I present evidence of his financial abuse. Financial abuse? The $23,000 he's been stealing from your joint accounts to fund his gambling addiction. I almost gasped out loud. Even through the wire, I could hear Mom's sharp intake of breath. David doesn't gamble. And you're the one who took our money. According to the bank records I prepared, your confused, desperate husband has been making increasingly erratic financial decisions while trying to cope with your deteriorating condition. Richard's voice turned cold. Linda, you need to understand something. I've been planning this for months. Every conversation we've had, every document you've signed, every medical appointment you've attended, it's all been building toward this moment. The scope of his manipulation was breathtaking. This wasn't a crime of passion or even simple greed. This was systematic, calculated destruction of my family. I want out, Mom whispered. Richard, I want out of all of this. The silence stretched for 15 seconds. When Richard spoke again, his voice had changed completely. I'm afraid that's not really an option anymore, Linda. You see, you're in this just as deep as I am now. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Through the wire, I could hear Mom's breathing getting shallow and panicked. What do you mean, not an option? She asked. I mean you've signed legal documents committing fraud, Linda. You filed false medical reports, lied to healthcare professionals, and participated in planning your husband's illegal commitment. Richard's voice was patient, almost gentle, like he was explaining something to a child. If this comes out now, you're looking at felony charges for medical fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy. I pressed myself harder against the maintenance closet door, watching Richard pace around the motel room like a predator circling prey. But you made me sign those papers, Mom protested weakly. Did I hold a gun to your head? Did I threaten you? Richard sat down on the bed beside her, his proximity clearly making her uncomfortable. No, Linda. You signed them willingly because you wanted your husband out of the picture. Any jury will see it that way. Through my earpiece, Detective Morrison's voice was tense. He's trying to make her complicit. This is exactly what we needed. I never wanted David hurt, Mom said, her voice breaking. I just wanted to be with you. And you can be. Tomorrow night, we'll be in Mexico, and this will all be behind us. Richard pulled out his phone and showed her something on the screen. I've already transferred the remaining balance from your joint checking account. $47,000. More than enough to start fresh. My blood boiled. That was Dad's retirement money, money he'd been saving for 30 years. You said you only needed the $23,000 for your mother's medical bills. Richard laughed, that same cold sound I'd heard earlier. Linda, my mother died 4 years ago. The hospice story, the medical bills, the tearful phone calls you overheard, all theater. Just like your dementia act. I watched Mom's face crumble as the final pieces clicked into place. The other women. Margaret, Patricia, Janet. You did the same thing to them. Not exactly the same. You've been my most ambitious project. Richard's tone was almost proud. The others were simple financial cons. But you, Linda, you've helped me create something beautiful. A perfect crime where you're too implicated to ever tell the truth. What about Martha Williams? The woman in Tennessee. Richard went very still. Through the window, I could see his jaw tighten. What about her? The detective said she died. That she was going to testify against you. Martha made poor choices, Richard said carefully. She forgot that discretion was in everyone's best interest. The implication hit me like a physical blow. Detective Rodriguez's voice crackled through my earpiece. Did he just confess to murder? Richard, did you hurt Martha? I protected both of us from a very messy situation. Just like I'm protecting us now. Richard stood and walked to the window, looking directly toward my hiding spot. For a moment, I thought he'd seen me, but his gaze moved on. Linda, I need you to focus. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., you're going to Dr. Patterson's office. You're going to tell her that David has been acting increasingly paranoid and violent. That you're afraid he might hurt himself or others. I won't do that. Yes, you will. Because if you don't, I'll release recordings of our conversations over the past 8 months. Recordings where you laugh about your husband cutting your food into small pieces. Where you practice forgetting his name. Where you plan his commitment like you're organizing a dinner party. Mom went white. You recorded us. Insurance policy, darling. Every phone call, every meeting in this room. Hours of audio of you enthusiastically participating in this plan. Richard's smile was cruel. How do you think Ryan will feel hearing his mother laugh about his father's devotion? How will David react to hearing you mock his tears in the support group meetings? I wanted to burst through that door and strangle him. The calculated cruelty of using Mom's own words against her was breathtaking. You're a monster, Mom whispered. I'm a businessman. And tomorrow, you're going to complete our business transaction, or everyone you love will hear exactly what kind of woman you really are. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Morrison. We have enough. Get ready to move. But before I could respond, Richard's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. Detective Morrison, Riverside County Sheriff's Department, he said, answering on speaker. How did you get this number? Hello, Dick. We need to talk. Richard's face went dead calm, which was somehow more terrifying than anger would have been. I'm afraid you have the wrong number, Detective. Room 237 at the Pine Lodge. You have 30 seconds to come out with your hands visible, or we're coming in. The motel room exploded into chaos. Richard grabbed Mom's arm, yanking her toward the bathroom. How many people did you tell? He snarled. Nobody. Richard, I swear, I didn't. Shut up. He dragged her past the window, and I could see the desperation replacing his calculated composure. This is your fault. You and your idiot son ruined everything. Through my earpiece, all units move now. Suspect is armed and has a hostage. Armed? My heart stopped. Richard had a gun. The bathroom door slammed shut just as the motel room door exploded inward. The bathroom door splintered as Detective Rodriguez kicked it in, her weapon drawn. Through the chaos, I could see Richard pressed against the far wall, one arm wrapped around Mom's neck, his other hand holding what looked like a small silver pistol against her temple. Let her go, Brennan. Rodriguez shouted. There's nowhere to run. There's always somewhere to run, Richard replied, his voice eerily calm despite the sweat beading on his forehead. I've done this before, Detective. Ask Martha Williams how well your protection worked. Mom's eyes were wide with terror, but she wasn't struggling. Smart woman, she knew any sudden movement could set him off. Richard, she said quietly, please don't do this. We can figure something else out. He laughed bitterly. Figure what out, Linda? You think there's a happy ending here? You think your husband's going to forgive you? You think your son will ever look at you the same way? Detective Morrison appeared in the doorway behind Rodriguez, his weapon also drawn. Dick, you're looking at kidnapping charges now on top of everything else. Let Mrs. Hayes go, and we can discuss a deal. The only deal I'm interested in is walking out of here. Richard's grip tightened on Mom's throat. I have a flight to catch tomorrow night, and I intend to be on it. That's when I made the stupidest decision of my life. I stepped out of the maintenance closet and walked across the parking lot toward room 237, my hands raised but my voice recorder still running in my pocket. Richard, I called out, stopping just outside the shattered doorway. Let's talk about this. Just you and me. Ryan, no. Mom screamed, but Richard shushed her with a sharp jerk. The son, Richard said, his eyes lighting up with something that might have been genuine pleasure. Perfect timing. Come in slowly, hands where I can see them. Ryan, get back. Detective Rodriguez hissed, but I was already stepping through the debris. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You're going to let my mother go, and I'm going to make sure you get exactly what you deserve. Richard's laugh was genuinely delighted. What I deserve? Kid, do you have any idea what your mother deserves? Should I tell you about the recordings I have of her practicing her confused act? About her laughing when she described your father crying over her fake diagnosis? I already know, I said simply. I heard everything today. But here's what you don't know, Dick. His smile faltered slightly at my tone. My father isn't home with protective detail like you think. He's in the van outside with Detective Morrison's partner, listening to everything you've said for the past 20 minutes. I pulled my phone from my pocket, holding it up so he could see the active call. Dad? You getting all this? Dad's voice came through the speaker, clear and strong, every word, son. Linda? Can you hear me? Mom started crying. David, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I know, honey. We'll figure it out. But right now, I need you to do exactly what Detective Rodriguez tells you to do. Richard's face cycled through confusion, rage, and finally a kind of desperate calculation. This doesn't change anything. I still have the gun. I still have. You have nothing, I interrupted. No money, we froze all the accounts this afternoon. No flight, your passport was flagged hours ago. No leverage, because we already know the worst thing about my mother, and we still love her. You think love fixes fraud? You think love fixes 8 months of lies? No, Dad's voice came through the phone. But love means we face the consequences together instead of running away like cowards. The words hit Richard like a physical blow. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked genuinely rattled. Linda, he said, his voice cracking slightly, tell them. Tell them how unhappy you were. Tell them how David suffocated you, how you felt trapped. Let her go, Richard, Mom said quietly. Please. It's over. Something in her voice, maybe the complete absence of fear, or maybe just the quiet dignity, seemed to break whatever hold Richard thought he had on the situation. His grip loosened for just a second. That's all Detective Rodriguez needed. She moved like lightning, yanking Mom away while Detective Morrison tackled Richard from behind. The gun skittered across the bathroom tile, and suddenly it was over. Richard Brennan, professional con artist and destroyer of families, sat handcuffed on a motel bathroom floor, crying like a child. 3 months later, I sat in Dad's kitchen watching him make coffee the same way he had every morning for 30 years. Mom was at Millfield General, not as a fake dementia patient this time, but attending court-mandated therapy sessions for people who'd been victims of financial crimes. She's doing better, Dad said, reading my mind. Dr. Patterson says the guilt is the hardest part to work through, but Linda's finally being honest about everything. Richard had been sentenced to 15 years for elder fraud, kidnapping, and conspiracy in Martha Williams' death. The recordings I'd made, combined with Mom's testimony, had provided enough evidence to connect him to crimes in 6 states. He'd stolen over $400,000 from elderly victims, but more than that, he'd stolen years of peace from families who trusted him. What about you and Mom? I asked. Dad was quiet for a long time, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. We're in counseling. Both together and separately. It's hard, Ryan. 31 years of marriage, and I have to learn to trust her again with everything from grocery shopping to taking her medication. Are you going to make it? I don't know, he said honestly. Some days I look at her and see the woman I married. Other days, I see someone who is capable of planning to have me committed to a psychiatric facility. He sat down across from me. But I also see someone who was manipulated by a professional predator who knew exactly which buttons to push. Mom walked in then, carrying her purse and a folder of paperwork from her therapy session. She looked older, more fragile than she had even during her fake dementia act. But her eyes were clearer than they'd been in months. How did it go today? Dad asked. Hard. Dr. Patterson wants me to call Mrs. Chin next week. Margaret Chin, Richard's first victim. She thinks talking to her might help with the guilt. Mom sat down at the table where, 3 months ago, I'd watched Dad organize her fake medication schedule. Ryan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. I nodded. That night when you got my voicemail, why didn't you just delete it? Why didn't you pretend it never happened? I thought about it for a moment. Because Dad deserved better than being lied to for the rest of his life. And because, somewhere under all those lies, I thought maybe you deserved better too. Mom started crying then, not the manipulative tears I'd seen at the motel, but the quiet, exhausted crying of someone who'd finally stopped pretending. I don't know how to make this right, she whispered. Dad reached across the table and took her hand. Maybe we start with the truth. All of it, every day, even when it's hard. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. I left them there, talking quietly over coffee, working through the wreckage of what they'd been and trying to build something honest from what was left. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined that night when I first heard Mom's voicemail, but it was real. And after 8 months of lies, real was enough.